Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at a recent aviation accident in South Korea.
Okay.
A Jeju Air flight was returning from Bangkok
Mm,
with 181 souls on board.
right.
Tragically ended in a crash landing, and we'll be dissecting this event, drawing from news reports by sources like the BBC and Reuters Yonhap.
Right.
But as always, we're not just after the cold hard facts. We want to understand the human impact,
Yeah.
the why behind the what, and maybe even uncover some insights that surprise us both.
It's certainly a case that raises a lot of questions, especially when you consider South Korea's generally strong aviation safety record.
Yeah.
And the fact that this was Jeju Air's first fatal accident since its founding in 2005.
Right.
So we have this unsettling contrast, a nation and an airline with good track records, yet we still have this tragic outcome.
Exactly. That's what grabbed my attention, too. It's not a story you see every day.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. The flight was destined for Muan International Airport, about 178 miles south of Seoul, when it crashed shortly after 9 a.m. local time. Okay. Reports described the plane skidding off the runway, hitting a wall, and then a fire breaking out in part of the aircraft.
And unfortunately, the casualties were significant.
Yeah.
Of the 181 people on board, 175 passengers, and 6 crew members, 62 were killed. 37 women and 25 men.
Wow.
Yeah, it paints a grim picture of the impact.
It's truly heartbreaking. It makes you wonder, for those who survived, what their experience was like in those terrifying moments.
Right.
But it also highlights the critical role of the emergency response teams.
Yes.
We know 80 firefighters and over 30 fire trucks were on scene, focusing primarily on rescuing people trapped in the tail section of the aircraft.
Right.
There's a glimmer of hope, though, right?
Yeah.
One flight attendant and one passenger were successfully rescued.
That's right. Every life saved in these situations is a victory, and it speaks to the dedication and skill of those first responders working against the clock.
Yeah.
They're the unsung heroes in these tragedies.
Absolutely. Now, on to the big question.
Yeah.
What caused this crash? Early reports point to the possibility of bird strikes. Now, I'll admit, when I first heard that, I thought, really? Bird strikes? Yeah. How could something seemingly so minor bring down an entire aircraft? Right. Help me understand this. For those of us who aren't aviation experts, why are bird strikes considered so dangerous, especially during critical phases like landing?
You've hit on a common misconception.
Okay.
While bird strikes might sound trivial, they pose a serious threat to aircraft, particularly during takeoff and landing when planes are closest to the ground and traveling at lower speeds. Imagine a bird, even a small one, getting ingested into an aircraft engine at high velocity.
Oh, wow.
The impact can cause significant damage to the engine's delicate internal components,
Yeah.
potentially leading to engine failure.
So it's not just about the size of the bird, but the force of the impact and where it strikes the plane.
Yeah,
It's kind of like a tiny projectile hitting a very complex machine at the worst possible time.
exactly. And it's not just the engines that are vulnerable.
Oh.
A flock of birds colliding with a plane could damage the windshield, the wings, or even the fuselage.
Okay.
This can disrupt the plane's aerodynamics, affect its controllability, and in a worst-case scenario, lead to a loss of control.
Okay. That paints a much clearer picture of the danger.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, don't aircraft designs incorporate features to minimize the impact of bird strikes?
They absolutely do. Aircraft manufacturers invest heavily in designing and testing aircraft to withstand bird strikes. This includes things like reinforced windshields, engine designs that can tolerate bird ingestion to a certain extent, and even strategies for diverting birds away from airports.
Huh.
But the reality is no technology can provide 100% protection against every possible bird strike scenario.
So it's a combination of factors, right? The severity of the strike, the point of impact on the aircraft, the speed and altitude of the plane at the time, and how well the aircraft can withstand and recover from such an event.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a complex interplay of variables. And in the case of this Jeju Air flight, it seems like a particularly unfortunate combination of circumstances may have led to this tragic outcome. Now, to fully understand how this might have unfolded, we need to delve into a critical piece of the puzzle, the black boxes.
Okay.
You've likely heard the term, but for our listeners who might not be familiar with aviation jargon, can you explain what black boxes are and why they're so important in investigations like this?
Great point. We often use jargon without realizing not everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
So black boxes, despite the name, they're actually bright orange,
Yeah.
are essentially the aircraft's data recorders.
Right.
There are two primary types. The flight data recorder, FDR, which tracks technical details like altitude, speed, and direction, and the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, which captures conversations and sounds in the cockpit.
And in this investigation, the black boxes will be like a window into those final moments of the flight. Investigators will analyze the data from the FDR to understand the plane's trajectory, its system's performance, and the actions taken by the crew.
Okay.
The CVR, on the other hand, can reveal what the pilots were saying.
Yeah.
Any alarms that were sounding and any other sounds in the cockpit that could offer clues about what was happening.
It's like having a fly-on-the-wall perspective, even though, tragically, no one can physically tell us what happened.
Exactly.
Huh?
The black boxes are invaluable tools for piecing together the chain of events leading up to an accident and understanding the factors that contributed to it.
Right.
In this case, they'll be crucial for determining the role of the suspected bird strikes,
Yeah.
how the pilots responded, and whether any other technical issues might have been involved.
This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
We have this suspected cause bird strikes, which on the surface might seem almost too simple.
Right.
But as we've discussed, the reality is far more complex. The black boxes hold the key to untangling that complexity.
And remember, these investigations take time.
Right.
It's not about rushing to judgment, but about meticulously analyzing every piece of evidence to build a comprehensive understanding of what happened. Only then can we start to draw meaningful conclusions and potentially identify areas for improvement to prevent similar tragedies in the future.
So as we head into the next part of our deep dive, we'll be looking at what those black boxes might reveal, what other factors investigators will be considering, and how this incident might impact the future of aviation safety.
Okay.
But before we move on, I think it's crucial to acknowledge the human element of this tragedy. We can talk about technical details and investigations, but at the heart of this story are 181 individuals, 173 South Korean passengers, and 2 Thai passengers returning from their trip, plus the 6 crew members who were simply doing their jobs.
Yeah,
Their lives and those of their families have been irrevocably changed.
absolutely.
All right.
Behind the statistics and technical jargon are real people with stories, hopes, and dreams. And as we continue this deep dive, it's essential to remember that this isn't just an abstract analysis of an aviation accident. It's a story about human lives, and the impact of this tragedy will be felt for years to come. Picking up where we left off, let's delve into what those black boxes might reveal and explore the other factors that investigators will be scrutinizing.
Right.
As we discussed, it's a meticulous process,
Yeah.
like assembling a complex jigsaw puzzle, where each piece of data helps form a clearer picture of what transpired.
It's almost like stepping into the role of a detective, right?
Yeah.
Except the stakes are incredibly high and the clues are scattered across technical data, voice recordings, and the wreckage itself.
Precisely. And beyond the black boxes,
Yeah.
investigators will be looking at everything from the weather conditions at the time of the crash to the plane's maintenance records, examining the pilot's training and experience, and analyzing any communications between the aircraft and air traffic control leading up to the incident.
Speaking of clues, the fact that the plane skidded off the runway suggests a potential issue with braking or steering, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Could that point to mechanical failure, pilot error, or even something as seemingly simple as a slippery runway due to weather conditions?
You're thinking along the right lines.
Yeah.
Each of those scenarios is a possibility that investigators will need to explore, and the fact that part of the aircraft caught fire adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
Was the fire a result of the impact, or did it perhaps contribute to the crash?
Yeah.
These are questions that will require in-depth analysis of the wreckage and a careful reconstruction of the sequence of events.
It's difficult to even imagine what those passengers and crew must have experienced in those final moments.
Yeah.
Do you think they would have had any warning?
Oh,
Were they able to brace for impact?
it's
These are questions that must weigh heavily on investigators as they piece together what happened.
undoubtedly, those are the human aspects of these investigations that can be particularly challenging to grapple with. We can analyze data and reconstruct events, but fully comprehending the human experience in those moments is something we can only try to approach with sensitivity and respect for those involved.
It's a stark reminder that while we strive for technological advancements and rigorous safety protocols, aviation, like any complex system, involves human factors that can sometimes lead to unforeseen consequences.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's often a combination of factors, a chain of events,
Yeah.
that leads to these tragic outcomes.
Mm.
That's why these investigations are so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
By meticulously examining every detail, we can potentially identify weaknesses in the system,
Right.
areas where human error might have played a role, or where existing safety procedures could be enhanced.
So it's not just about determining the cause of this specific crash, but also about extracting valuable lessons that can be applied to prevent similar incidents from happening again.
Exactly.
It's about continuous learning and improvement within the aviation industry.
Absolutely. The findings of this investigation will likely have ripple effects throughout the industry, potentially leading to new safety protocols, revised training procedures for pilots and crew, or even modifications to aircraft design and airport infrastructure.
And this isn't just about Jeju Air.
Right.
While this is their first fatal accident and a significant blow to their safety record, the lessons learned here could benefit airlines and aviation authorities globally.
That's an important point. Every accident, regardless of the airline or location,
Yeah.
offers an opportunity for the entire industry to learn and enhance safety measures.
Mm.
It's about a collective commitment to making air travel as safe as possible.
Now, we've talked a lot about the technical aspects of the investigation and the potential for systemic improvements.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to the human cost of this tragedy.
Okay.
We can't lose sight of the fact that 62 lives were lost, leaving behind grieving families and a community grappling with immense sorrow.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the technical details and the analytical aspects of these events. But at its core, this is a story about human lives lost and forever altered. Those 62 individuals represent families, shattered dreams unfulfilled, and a profound sense of loss that will reverberate for years to come.
And it's not just the passengers and crew. We need to consider the first responders who rushed to the scene,
Yes.
the medical personnel who treated the injured,
Right.
the air traffic controllers who witnessed the unfolding tragedy. They, too, carry the weight of this event.
Their roles are often overlooked,
Mm-hmm.
but they are the unsung heroes who confront these tragedies head on.
Yeah.
They deserve our recognition and support as they cope with the emotional toll of witnessing such events.
It's a sobering reminder that these accidents have a ripple effect,
Right.
impacting a much wider circle than we often realize. It underscores the need for compassion and support for everyone affected, from the families of the victims to the first responders who are often left to process these traumatic experiences.
Indeed, providing counseling services, mental health resources, and community support is crucial in the aftermath of these events. It's about acknowledging the human cost of these tragedies and ensuring that those affected have access to the support they need to heal and rebuild their lives.
Now, as we transition into the final part of our depth dive, I'm curious to explore how this accident might impact the future of aviation safety. What concrete changes might emerge from this investigation, and what lessons we can all take away as passengers and as individuals concerned about safety in air travel. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a crucial question to consider. We've seen throughout history that tragedies like this often serve as catalysts for significant advancements in safety protocols and technology. This incident will undoubtedly contribute to that ongoing evolution, prompting a renewed focus on potential vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
areas where human error can be minimized,
Yeah.
and ways to further enhance the resilience of aircraft and aviation systems. But it's not just about the industry response.
Okay.
It's about us as passengers, becoming more informed and engaged in safety discussions.
That's an excellent point. What steps can passengers take to be more proactive about their safety when flying? That's a great question to consider as we wrap up our deep dive. What can we as passengers actually do to be more proactive about safety when we fly beyond the usual listen to the safety briefing, of course?
Well, for starters, being aware of the potential risks is key. We've
Yeah.
talked extensively about bird strikes. But there are other factors like weather conditions, mechanical issues, and even human error that can contribute to accidents. Staying informed about these risks, not in a way that fuels anxiety,
Right.
but in a way that empowers you as a passenger,
Hmm.
can be beneficial.
So it's about being informed but not alarmed. What sources of information would you recommend for passengers who want to learn more about aviation safety?
There are several excellent resources available. Organizations like the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICA, and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, provide valuable information on safety regulations, accident investigations, and industry best practices. You can also find reputable aviation safety websites and publications that offer insights into various aspects of air travel safety.
And I imagine staying up to date on news related to aviation safety, especially any updates on specific airlines you might be considering flying with, is also a good idea.
Absolutely. Being aware of any recent incidents or safety concerns involving an airline can help you make informed decisions about your travel plans. Remember, knowledge is power, and in the context of aviation safety, it can empower you to make safer choices.
I think there's also something to be said for simply being observant and attentive when you're flying, paying attention to the safety briefing, being aware of your surroundings, and noticing anything that seems unusual or out of place can make a difference.
You're absolutely right. Don't hesitate to report any concerns you might have to the flight attendants or crew members. They are trained to handle safety issues and will take your concerns seriously. Remember, safety is a collective responsibility, and your vigilance as a passenger can contribute to a safer flying experience for everyone on board.
Now, before we conclude our deep dive, I want to address something that often comes up after aviation accidents: the fear factor. It's understandable that people might feel anxious about flying after hearing about these incidents. How do you suggest dealing with that fear, especially if you have to fly for work or personal reasons?
It's perfectly normal to experience some anxiety about flying, especially after a high-profile accident. But it's important to remember that statistically, air travel remains one of the safest modes of transportation. Focus on the facts, rely on reputable sources of information, and avoid sensationalized media coverage that often amplifies fear without providing balanced context.
That's good advice. Don't let fear dictate your choices, but instead arm yourself with knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. And if you find that your anxiety about flying is persistent or debilitating, consider seeking professional help from a therapist specializing in travel anxiety or phobias. There are effective therapies that can help you manage and overcome your fear of flying.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive. We've explored the technical complexities of the Jeju Air accident, delved into the investigative process, and most importantly, highlighted the human impact of this tragedy. As we wrap up, what's the key message you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the core message is that aviation safety is a continuous journey, a collective effort that involves everyone from aircraft manufacturers and regulators to airlines, pilots, crew members, and yes, even passengers. We've come a long way in making air travel safer. But there's always room for improvement, for learning from past accidents, and for implementing measures to prevent future tragedies.
And let's not forget the importance of compassion and empathy for those affected by these accidents. It's easy to get caught up in the technical details and statistics, but behind every aviation accident are human stories of loss, grief, and resilience. Let's honor those stories by advocating for continuous safety improvements and by supporting those whose lives have been touched by these tragedies.
Beautifully said, this deep dive has been a heavy but necessary exploration of a complex topic. I hope our listeners have gained a deeper understanding of the intricacies of aviation safety and the profound impact of these events on human lives.
And as we always emphasize, staying informed is key. We encourage you to continue exploring this topic, to seek out reputable sources of information, and to engage in thoughtful conversations about how we can collectively work towards a safer future for air travel.
Because ultimately, that's what this is all about, using knowledge and understanding to create a safer world for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.